Welcome everyone to this webinar. It looks like we're at the top of the hour. We'll go ahead and get started. We'd like to welcome you all out to this webinar on Supercharge Office 365 with Retain. A few things to take note of first. Just if you are wanting to ask questions, we're going to have time at the end for Q&A. Just go ahead and put those questions through in the question panel there in your GoToWebinar. Also, would like to thank everybody who saw us at Microsoft Ignite. It was a great event. We had a lot of great conversations about supercharging Office 365 and how Retain can help with that. Also, for those of you would like to thank who went to the Gartner Symposium, this is also a webinar for you as well. So once again, thanks everyone for being there at Ignite and at Gartner Symposium and for coming by and visiting with us. To begin, I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm Q Mangus. I'm the Product Marketing Manager here at Micro Focus for Information Archiving. And today I'm going to be presenting to you some information about Retain and about Unified Archiving and about how it can work with Office 365 and other platforms as well. So to begin, I just want to talk a little bit about Office 365. As many of us on this call know, Office 365 is a great solution. We know it is because one of the reasons being the market share is just out there, right? So many people are using this solution. So just some things to remember. Office 365 has some great benefits and some great advantages. For example, it's always up to date. You always have the latest version, the latest software when you're using this cloud-based solution. And as a cloud-based solution, there's reduced maintenance costs, reduced personnel costs, and of course, with the way that Office 365 is set up, you can access it anytime, anywhere. And of course the SLA there that they have for 99.9% uptime. So we know this is a great collaboration solution that's in the marketplace. Some things that have happened recently with Office 365 and their archiving solution is that now eDiscovery is more efficient. There's a fast search capability, and the way that they perform legal holds has been improved. Also through the Outlook web app, users can search their primary and archive mailboxes. So there are some improvements that have been there in Office 365. However, there are some things that are missing, and that's kind of the point of what we want to talk about in this webinar today. Some of the things really to take note of, and this is especially important for those of you who are using other plans on Office 365, is that to be able to get this archiving functionality and the eDiscovery functionality that we were talking about, is you actually have to purchase the Enterprise E3 licensing to be able to archive your email. So once again, that's an additional cost that you have to be aware of. That's something that you have to pay for. Some other things too is there's no support for archiving social media. So remember that archiving is mainly just for Office 365 email. There's no archiving support for mobile communication like text messaging. It only archives Office 365 email, no other platforms. That Office 365 archive can't be accessed offline. That can be important for different workers depending on where they access their information. Also, Office 365 does not have redaction, which is very important. If you're involved in litigation or eDiscovery, you need to be able to redact certain information so it's not part of the public record. Then, of course, because it doesn't support social media or mobile communication data, you can't access that from one central location. You can only access that Microsoft Office 365 email. And then, of course, it's also difficult in migrating. If you're ever moving away from Office 365, the migration path is difficult. So those are some of the things that we're going to address today and talk about, and how we here at Micro Focus can help solve those deficiencies. And so what I want to talk about here is this ability that we have with Retain to be able to supercharge Office 365. So what Retain can do is it actually features complete archiving of all Office 365 plans. That's E1, E3, E5, Business Essentials, Premium. Any plan that you have, Retain can integrate with Office 365 and archive it. Then, of course, there's built-in litigation support with eDiscovery and redaction. And then we like to call Retain the unified archiving solution because we can archive of course, Office 365 email, in addition to other email platforms and social media and mobile communication in that same central archive. So you can actually archive your iOS, your Android, your BlackBerry communication. So those are some of the things that we can do, and we'll get into more details on that as we go along. So let's start talking about Retain Unified Archiving and how it can benefit you. So what I want to do is we show this picture here to kind of talk about how your information that's out there in your organization when it comes to communication data, be that email communication or social media or mobile communication data, it's kind of like these shredded files, right? They're out there. And you can kind of see them, but being able to get to them and be able to make sense of what's in that information from one central location is difficult. And so you need to be able to have a solution that can take that information and put it into one central archive that can be easily accessed and can be used. Another thing that we talk about is that many, especially with Office 365, is you have this idea of silos of data, right? So you have a silo of data for your Office 365 email when it's archived with the built-in archiving solution. If you have social media and you're archiving that, that's probably done through another solution. If you have mobile, maybe you're doing that as well. That's another solution. So you run into this situation where your information is spread throughout your organization. And if you don't have an archiving solution at all, of course there's going to be silos of data, right? Because you're going to have PST files scattered throughout your organization. You're going to have social media posts. It's just really difficult to stay on top of what's going on in your organization. And so that's one of the things that we try to solve when it comes to what we call Retain Unified Archiving, which is taking all those silos of data and getting them into one central archive. And that's why we call it Unified Archiving. Is that we can take all of your email, your multi-platform email, your mobile communication data, your social media and instant messaging, and be able to put that into one central archive that is easily accessible. And we give you the ability to access that, whether that's through the web interface, and I'll show that in just a moment, an email plugin like through Outlook, a mobile app, or even the offline viewer. So you have the ability to have multiple ways in which you can access that archive, and that archive is in that central location. Also, a few other things with Retain is it has intelligent archiving, which means that it integrates directly with the email system. So in the case of Microsoft Exchange or Office 365, we would use journaling, or would take advantage of the recoverable items folder, making it so that you can be sure to have full and complete and compliant archiving and that nothing's lost. And of course, as I mentioned before, you need to have that built-in, or you need to be able to perform e-discovery with redaction, and Retain features built-in e-discovery. So the circle here that you can see just shows some of the platforms that we support, and I'll talk about each one individually, but just know that all of these platforms are archived into that one central archive that you can easily access, perform e-discovery, and be able to perform redaction, and that it integrates with your email system to be able to archive everything in there. So now, specifically with Office 365, what you will have by adding on Retain and being able to add value to Office 365 with Retain is that multi-platform and mixed platform environment. So many organizations run into this. If they're running Office 365, they may also be running another email solution at the same time. And so what we can do with Retain is be able to archive both of those and be able to have that multiple support, so that when you have one solution can be archived in Office with, for example, Office 365. One solution that could be archived with Retain is Office 365, but you could also archive Exchange or GroupWise or other solutions as well in that one central archive. And of course, with Retain, you have mobile communication archiving, social media monitoring and archiving, that e-discovery that I talked about, search tools and publishing tools, the standalone archive viewer, and I'll show that. Of course, the central access and control, as we talked about that idea of a unified archive where you can access everything from one central archive. And then you can be able to easily migrate if you ever do have to move, because Retain archives everything in a platform agnostic format. So if you do have to move away from Office 365, or if you're moving from another platform to Office 365, we make that migration easy. Because what will happen is Retain, you can archive everything in Retain. You can then go out and deploy your new email system, tie that system into Retain, and then be able to have your old system archived in Retain and your new system archived in Retain going forward. And so you don't have to worry about keeping your old system around just to be able to access old emails. It could be in Retain, and then of course it will be archived going forward. Now, specifically with Retain and email archiving, let me touch on that for a minute, because like I talked about, Retain has that unified archive with all your electronic communication in one central archive. But in particular, with email, of course, as we talked about, it archives Office 365 email. It also archives Exchange email, and with those two platforms, it archives Skype for Business. So if you're running that, we can archive that into Retain. It also archives GroupWise and Gmail, IBM Notes, and Bloomberg Professional. So any of those platforms that you're using today, or if you potentially are looking to move to one of those, we could archive that in that central archive. What's great too is that with Retain, your users can browse their own personal archive, and an administrator can access and browse the entire archive. And this is especially important for your end users, is that the folders are replicated so that the UI looks familiar to them. So then when they go into the archive, it's going to look similar to what they would see, say, in Outlook. And then, of course, speaking of Outlook, there is a plugin for Outlook so that your users can access their archive directly from Outlook. So here's an example of what I was talking about. So as you can see, the folder structure is replicated over. This is an example of, this is actually my archive in Retain. So you can see that your folders are replicated over. The messages that are archived are there to browse, and everything that are in the folders are also replicated over. And of course, an end user can search their own personal archive. They can forward, they can restore, print, do different things that you have accessed rights for them. And I'll show how that works in just a moment here. And then here's an example of the Outlook plugin. As I talked about, there is an email plugin for accessing the archive. Your end users can access it directly from Outlook, be able to do searches from there, and they can even cache archive messages for offline use. So if they want to be able to, they're going on a plane as an example, and they're not going to be accessing the internet, they can have their archived messages cached for offline use, and that's just all they'd have to do is specify the time period in which they would like to be able to have those cached. Let me shift gears here a little bit, and once again, if you have any questions, feel free to put those through in the question panel there on the GoToWebinar UI there, and we'll be sure to answer them. Let me just check and see if we have any at this point. Okay, I don't see any questions right now, but feel free to put those through. But moving along, let's talk a little bit about mobile. So mobile's gained a lot of traction lately, and I would imagine that you and your organization have employees that are accessing corporate email. They may even be texting you that they may be texting your customers or other employees using their mobile device. And they may be something that they're bringing their own personal device, or they could be maybe a corporate issued device, or maybe something where they chose their own device and it's corporate issued as well. But the idea is that mobile devices have gained a ton of traction, and we know that that's kind of the preferred way in which people like to communicate now is via these mobile devices. And so this causes kind of a problem for your organization, because you need to have oversight on these communications. What if your employees are communicating via text messages? They're sending text messages to your customers potentially. They're using that for communication, and that's a good thing in the sense that you want them to be able to communicate in the way that they prefer and the way that your customers prefer. But where it can be difficult is if you don't have oversight on those communications. So that's where Retain Mobile can help. We can archive Android, BlackBerry, and an iOS. There's 2 ways in which we can do it, there's 3 ways in which we can do this depending on what you need in your organization. So first of all, we have the way of archiving them directly from the device. So for Android and BlackBerry, what we do is we will tie directly to the for BlackBerry in particular, we will tie directly to the BlackBerry Enterprise Service and be able to pull the messages down from there. That would be text messages, BBM, PIN messages, phone call logs, etc. For Android, we would have an app that sits on the Android device, and we would pull down all the text messages and phone call logs directly from the Android device. Now, those are great. Both of those scenarios are great if you have corporate issued device. However, for BYOD, the best thing to do would be to have what we've partnered with a company called CellTrust, and what CellTrust can do is it actually places a separate app on the phone, and with that app, a user can call and place texts. And those texts are encrypted as long as they're from one CellTrust user to another, and then Retain ties directly to CellTrust to pull those messages down. And that works on iOS or Android, and that is how we can be able to have oversight on mobile communication for iOS since it's locked down. And then it's also great for if it's BYOD, because that makes it so that personal information stays personal, and then the business communication can have oversight, and you can be able to search that and perform e-discovery on that. So you have that idea of that dual persona. So that's what's great for a BYOD situation. Now we have one other way of archiving that is new for us. It's released recently or about to be released, and that is AT&T carrier level archiving. We have a new partnership with AT&T in which we can tie directly to their infrastructure and be able to pull down text messages directly from at the carrier level. So this is a great solution if you're using iOS, for example, where it's locked down and you can't get to the messages directly from the phone. We don't have any way of placing an app. No one does, of placing an app or getting at Apple's APIs to be able to pull that down. But what you can do is you can go directly to that carrier through AT&T and be able to pull those messages from the carrier, those text messages, and now you have oversight over that. Great solution. We're really excited for that. Look for more information coming soon on that. And if you want more information about that in particular, go ahead and visit us at guava.com. There's information there about that new release of Retain. But just know that we, depending on your situation, we have a solution for you, and that is all archived into that same central archive with email and social media. And speaking of that, let me show you a little bit about social media. So with Retain, we can monitor and archive social media. So we will actually be able to capture full resolution pictures, videos, GIFs, and other data formats. We'll be able to actually view the sentiment of content, so you'll be able to see, as you post things online, what the sentiment is, how your organization is doing with social media, how that's being perceived in the marketplace. Also, you can actually archive these platforms without having to have without logging into each separate account. All you have to do is have somebody logged in, they authenticate to the system, and now you can archive. You don't have to have the login credentials to be able to do that. And then, of course, this works on the network or off. All information is archived directly from these platforms. So just to review them, you have Pinterest, Instagram, LinkedIn, Google+, Twitter, Facebook, Vimeo, YouTube, and Flickr are all archived and supported with Retain Social. And then, of course, they're archived in that same central archive with email and mobile. let me just show a few screenshots of the search. So one other thing, as I talked about here, is that ability of Retain to be able to easily access that archive data. So you can go back, and that's the important thing with an archive, right? Obviously, it's important to have an archive to be able to check the box and say, okay, I'm archiving, I'm compliant. However, what's more important is to be able to manage your data, right? That's a reason for archiving, is to be able to have that data lifecycle management, be able to take email from your live system and put it onto an archive that will now make your email system run better. It will make Office 365 a better solution. And that's one of the things that Retain adds value with. And I wanted to make mention of that. And of course, you need to be able to access your archive, and that's important, and be able to search that. And so here's an example, and I'll show more of this live in just a minute. I'm going to show a demo. But being able to do a search and be able to get that information quickly. And you can see here, as you start to search, if you hit 3 letters, it will start to autofill stuff in the archive. And it will actually highlight in the text that information that you're searching, making it easy to find what you're looking for. And of course, as I talked about before, as a unified archive, all your messages come through your email, you can see a text message there, your social media all comes through in that one central search. And then as I was talking about, here's an example of that unified archive. You can filter based on what you want to see in that archive. Here's an example of some Twitter, Facebook, and text messages and YouTube that are in that unified archive. And then of course, I talked a little bit about this, is being able to access the archive is important. And so we also have an archive app that can be placed on Android or iOS to be able to access that archive from the mobile device. And one other thing that's very unique with Retain is this standalone archive viewer. So what the archive viewer does, we also call it the offline archive viewer, is it allows you to take the archive or a subset of the archive, export that, place it on a jump drive or a DVD or Dropbox or some sort of portable media, and hand that off to another team. So you'd hand that off to legal or HR or a team that you don't want necessarily accessing your entire archive. And with that, it's fully indexed. They can search that, and they can then export again to PDF if needs be. So with Retain, we give you those flexible ability to access and to export that archive. And then of course, as I talked about, redaction is supported, so you could take information. If you wanted to take some of this information here and redact that, you can black that out so it's not part of the public record. And then one other thing I wanted to touch on here, and we have this in a flyer as well if you're interested, is here's some examples of how of the different options with Office 365. And so you can see, if you do Exchange Online, what's included. There's another slide that goes a little bit more into this, and I'll show that in just a minute. What Retain, Archiving, Exchange Online will do for you, what E1 does, and what E3 and then what E3 with Retain does. So as you can see, Exchange Online is just for the email. If you want to be able to archive, you could archive with Exchange Online with Retain. With E1, of course, you don't get archiving either, but with Retain, you can be able to add that on, and for a much less price than going all the way to those E3 licenses, you can archive Retain with E1 licenses. So just take a look at that. Like I said, we have more. We have that on a flyer as well. If you're interested in that, feel free to download that from guava.com, and I'll place that in the email that we send afterwards, a link to that flyer. Some other things, if you want to just kind of look at, once you add Retain, you can be able to do those litigation holds, have redaction, be able to do that search, have offline access to the archive with those different plans. Now let me jump into a demo really quick of how Retain works. I'm going to show some of these things. Let me just switch over to that right now. Okay, so here's a view of what you would see if you log in as as an administrator. Let me show you a little bit about the users, because I talked about how a user can access their own personal archive. So let's look at an email user. So an email user has certain rights. So you can grant them rights like being able to view and save attachments. You can grant them rights to be able to delete messages, export messages, forward them, etc. There's different rights you can give them. Now, if you want to grant, so an administrator is going to have all rights, but you can grant other named users as well. So let's say you have an auditor and you want to grant them certain rights. You can grant them rights to access everything, to be able to apply litigation holds, public messages, etc. So you can see here that we allow you to grant different rights to different users depending on the needs of your organization. A couple other things that I want to show that's really important is this ability to audit. So the audit trail is important because you can see what people have accessed and where and when, to be able to, essentially get a view of what's been going on in the archive. So let's just do one here for the past month and just kind of see what's happened. So you can see that some people have logged in here. They've changed a user or group. Different things have happened. You can see everything that's gone. Look, they switched a mailbox. They searched the archive. So the great thing here is that you can see everything that's been going on in Retain, and this is very important for regulated industries because you have to be able to prove what's been going on in your archive, and this from here is where you can do that. Another thing I want to show really quick is this monitoring, being able to see the health of your Retain system at a quick glance, see what's happened lately, be able to see what the disk usage has been. Great, really important, especially for those who are using Retain on-prem. And that's another thing to just take note of as we're talking here is that Retain can be deployed on-premise, so you can have your email in the cloud with an on-prem archive, or you can also be deployed in the cloud if you want to have everything in the cloud as well. So some other things is Retain does support single instance storage, and you can see how that can really reduce the amount of storage that you have, which is great because Exchange and Office 365 don't support single instance storage, so your storage needs can grow. I know that Office 365 does offer plans where you get a lot of storage. However, without single instance storage, that storage can quickly be gobbled up. And of course, with Exchange, if you're running that on-prem, it can start to add up quickly and make for rising costs. And so by archiving it, of course, your costs are lowered and your email system is just going to run better. Okay, so a couple other things I want to show you is let's look at deletion management. This is really important because you want to be able to, especially for those companies that are doing business with organizations in Europe, under GDPR, which is coming, you need to be able to delete users if they request that. There's that right to be forgotten. And so what you can do is you can go into the deletion tool and you can actually delete an entire, let's go into the right one here. You can delete an entire user and everything that's been archived, which will allow you to comply with GDPR. If somebody does that request to have you delete everything that's in that archive, you can do that. And so that's under the deletion there, so you can be able to do that. Next, let me talk about litigation holds. This is very important. There's a couple ways you can do a legal hold. I'll show one of them here is when you go into, you can actually go in and place a hold on an entire mailbox. And then from the main search, I'll show that in just a minute, you can place holds on different messages. But here is where you would add a user to be able to place an entire user on litigation hold. And what you're going to do there is you're going to be able to, nothing from this user will be deleted until the litigation hold is removed. With Retain, it features policy-based archiving, so you can state, okay, everything older than 7 years is going to be deleted automatically off the archive. That's an example of a policy that you could set up. But with litigation holds, those won't be deleted even if they match the policy, even if they reach that limit for how long it's going to be archived. So that's the litigation holds. And then now let's jump into the system itself, because I want to show you a little bit how easy it is for a user. They can browse their personal archive, and then an end user can access any archive within your organization, and they can access that entire archive. And then from the search, as I talked about earlier, all they have to do is they start typing. It's going to auto-suggest some of the items that are in the archive so they can quickly access that. And then, of course, it's going to highlight, as you can see here, that information in the archive so you can quickly and easily get to that. And then also I wanted to show here that ability to place that litigation hold. All you'd have to do is select the message, place litigation hold, and then those messages will not be deleted until that litigation hold is deleted. And what's another nice thing too is, as I was talking about before, is you can, this is a unified archive, so everything is accessed from one central archive. I'm going to uncheck that just for a minute here. So we could actually drill down and see the exact things that we want to see. Let's see if anything, so there's a BBM pin message. I could be able to see any likes. So there's some there's a number of Twitter messages that came across. So you can actually go in here and specify exactly what you want to see, and just know that you can access all your email, your social media, and mobile from that one central archive. So let's just see if before I move back onto the presentation, let me just check and see if there's any other questions here. Anything that in particular you want to see and retain. One thing too is you can specify, of course, a date range. You could go ahead and say source, and then with the advanced search you can actually save these searches, and you can do different things. Say, subject, recipient, attachment names. There's a lot of things that you can do, and a lot of different terms that you can be searching and create filters and be able to save these searches for future. And of course, as we talked about before, you can, an administrator can place those litigation holds. They can place tags on messages. They can delete them. They can forward them. They can export, and they can restore. And end users can do these things too, depending on granted rights. Okay, let's jump back into the presentation here, because we're about done here. We're doing great on time. So I wanted to just, in review, talk about the 8 key features about Retain that really make it different in the marketplace. That idea of the unified archive. Well, it looks like I had a little error on my slide there, but multi-platform mixed environment unified archiving. That ability to have it on-prem or in the cloud. And we have 3 options to be able to do the cloud. You can do that as a private cloud, in a public cloud like AWS, or via partner cloud. And we have strategic partners that offer the cloud in different geographic locations depending on what you need, and to provide you with that data sovereignty. Of course, there's the flexible archive access, being able to access it from the web interface and that email plugin, or the mobile app, or the offline viewer. That ability to tie directly to your email system to do that intelligent archiving, making sure that you have a complete and compliant archive. Those built-in e-discovery tools, you don't have to add those on. They're in the system to be able to search, be able to perform e-discovery, place those litigation holds, redaction. And then, of course, tagging is a great one that I talked about, being able to place items, place a tag, a smart tag, confidential tag, and a rule-based tag. So what that means is that as an item is archived, you could tag it as it's coming in, or you can tag it after the fact. Then you also have the ability to do those email migrations, right? As I talked about, being able to have a platform agnostic archive to where if you ever need to move email systems, you can, and you can do that quickly. So what I would suggest from here is, of course, this webinar has been recorded. You can review this, you can share it with others. But if you want to see how Retain Unified Archiving can work for you, you could get a personalized demo or even get a quote to be able to see how affordable Retain can be. I would encourage you to reach out to us. We'd love to win your business. I know that we can add that value to your Office 365 investment by being able to give you archiving of all those plans, and to be able to give you of all Office 365 plans, other email platforms, and give you the ability to archive your mobile and social media in that one central archive. Reach out to us, get a quote, and let us win your business. Thanks again for being on this call, for your participation, for listening, and let's just take a look and see if we have any other questions. I'm going to jump here to this slide. Let's just see here. Okay, so one of the questions that comes through is that I'm seeing here is on mobile archiving, and the question is, how does it work with multiple devices? So with Retain, we're able to archive multiple devices, however many devices a user may have. So if they're using an Android or an iOS and they have that, we can archive that. And the way that Retain is priced for mobile is it's priced per device. So, but it's tied back to a user. So when you go and you authenticate those, it will authenticate back to the user. So we'd be able to see that particular user has a particular device, and then it's priced per the number of users that you're looking to archive, or excuse me, the number of devices you are looking to archive. Whereas with the email part of Retain, it's priced per user. And so I want to touch on that just a little bit now that question has been brought up, and that is that if you have Retain, there's a base price, and to be able to get the Retain system, and then if you're archiving email, it's going to be priced per user, and then you can add on the mobile piece, and that's priced per device, and then you can add on the social media piece, and that's priced per number of records that are archived per month. And so there's different tiers based on the number of records that you're going to be archiving, but it's not based on platform. We want to be able to allow you to archive every platform you have on social media, but the pricing is based on number of records, which looks like answers the next question here, which was how is Retain priced, and that's how it works. That's server price, and then per user for email, per record for social media, and then per device for mobile. Okay, that looks like all the questions we have for now. Good participation, everybody, and thanks once again for your time. As a reminder, this is recorded, so you should be getting an email shortly with a link to the recording, and with that flyer that I talked about how Retain adds value to Office 365. Once again, if you have any other questions that we didn't get to, feel free to put those through in the questions, and I'll reach back out to you. Also, you can reach out to us. I'm going to put that back up on the screen. Just a few email addresses that you can reach out to us with, and we'll be sure to get back out to you. And of course, you can always reach out to myself as well. Thanks everyone for your time, and look for that recording, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.